So good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to our Lunch and Learn event, which today presents the official launch of QUESCREN's Community Knowledge Open Library. My name is Patrick Donovan. I am Research Associate with the Quebec English-speaking Communities Research Network, QUESCREN at Concordia University, and I will be your moderator today. Before continuing, I'd like to acknowledge that Tiohtià:ke, Montreal, where I'm speaking from, is historically known as a gathering place for many First Nations. The Kanien'kehá:ka Nation is recognized as the custodian of these lands and waters today, and Montreal is home to a diverse population of Indigenous and other peoples. We respect the continued connections with the past, present, and future in our ongoing relationships with Indigenous and other peoples within the Montreal community. At QUESCREN, we're actively working on improving our relationships with Indigenous communities, especially ones that use English in Quebec. We're very excited to be able to present CKOL, the Community Knowledge Open Library, a growing online resource which currently contains over 1,300 documents gathered from over 25 groups working with English-speaking communities in Quebec. This resource aims to increase awareness and understanding of English-speaking Quebec by expanding the knowledge base, preserving and disseminating material that is vulnerable to disappearance, and supporting the production of research and evidence-based policy using this material. The presentations today will explore how to use this resource, the types of documents we've included, and next steps in its development, including an invitation to become a partner, if you're not one already. Our presenters today are Rebecca Miller and David Lessière, who will be representing Whiskey Echo Bravo, the IT firm that developed the site with us and cataloged the material. Lorraine O'Donnell, Research Associate at QUESCREN. Priscilla Griffin and Shannon Keats from the Coasters Association, joining us from Quebec's Lower North Shore, who are partners on our project, as well as Stephen Thompson from the Quebec Community Groups Network, who will be joining us from Montreal, and who is also a partner on this project. This event was made possible through the financial support of the Secretariat aux relations avec les Québécois d'expression anglaise of the Government of Quebec, and Mr. William Flock, Assistant Secretary at the Secretariat, is with us here today, and I will now turn the microphone over to him for some opening remarks.
Okay, thank you, Patrick. I'm going to keep it very short because I'm very excited about the content of what we're going to be seeing here today. I would just maybe underline that I think for all governments, and it's certainly true for our government and the government of Quebec and the Secretariat, the notion that in the development of public policy, in the delivery of services, in the understanding of different challenges that different components of society can face, the notion that community needs to have a voice is, I think, an important consideration. And through the studies, the reports, the briefs, all the various documents that have been developed by the community sector over the years, as Patrick alluded to, they're often hard to track down. If you weren't there at the right place at the right time, you don't necessarily have access to them. They may or may not have an ISBN number. They are difficult to access, that's for sure. And therefore, their contribution is less than it could be in terms of helping decision makers and governments understand the challenges that people articulate through those documents. So when QCGN came to us with the idea of developing this kind of tool as an adjunct to the other online bibliography tools that they've developed over the years, we were very enthusiastic, and we've been very pleased to see the evolution so far. And we're very encouraged that so many organizations have seen it worth their while to contribute their holdings into this tool. So I'll just end by saying congratulations to QCGN and to all the other participants, and I'm really looking forward to the growth and continuation of this project, because I think it really fills a gap. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Flock. I now invite Rebecca Miller, who is a librarian, and David Lessière, web architect, developer, and project manager from Whiskey Echo Bravo, as well as Lorraine O'Donnell, who will talk to us about some of the plans for future development of the library.
All right, hello everyone. Good afternoon. So just to very quickly introduce myself, my name is Rebecca. I am the classification system development and cataloging lead with CKOL. To very quickly introduce myself, I graduated from Western University with a Master's of Library and Information Science last spring, but I've worked in information management for a number of years, and I'm currently a records coordinator with the region of Peel, which is located in the Greater Toronto area. And I'm really excited to be here today to share this amazing resource with all of you. So for the next few minutes, we're just going to look at the library through my own lens, and I'll give you a very brief rundown of kind of how we organize the library collection and give you a tour of the website interface. Understanding the collection really begins with understanding gray literature, and it's been mentioned before that the value of it is very high for English-speaking communities across the province, and also we need to understand its unique impermanence. And gray literature simply refers to documents that are published outside of commercial or traditional publishing. So for most of our CKOL community partners and for most of the records in the library, this often refers to in-house publications, such as annual or research reports, externally distributed newsletters, press releases, documents like that. And we can see with this graphic on the right here, we can see this kind of spectrum of black and white and how gray literature kind of naturally falls right in the middle. And then since CKOL is an exclusively gray literature resource, we see how CKOL falls right in the middle of that spectrum. And what we see a lot with our community partners, we see how easily things can get lost. Gray lit doesn't have the same type of permanence as formal publishing. Sometimes there is one copy, and sometimes that copy gets lost or damaged over time. As these organizations grow, move locations, shift from physical paper documents to digital publications. You know, without a quote kind of formal publishing house, things get harder and harder to find as the years go on. And gray literature really comes together under a stable roof here with CKOL. And gray literature can be very unique, and that is reflected in the unique collection here with the contemporary and historical nature of the collection. So just for example, we have resources for newcomers to Quebec, dealing how to get a recycling bin, a driver's license, a library card, or resources on how to navigate employment during the COVID-19 pandemic. And on the other hand, we also have documents from the 1950s, 60s. One of the biggest and most complete collections in the library is these Quebec Home and School newsletters. And we have the first issues, you know, in 1943 up until the spring of 2021. Beginning even when they were the Quebec Federation of Protestant Home and School Associations. Or even before that, the Quebec Provincial Home and School, here with Volume 1, Issue 1 in 1943. So you can see that CKOL plays this really interesting kind of stabilizing, centralizing role, kind of gathering all these materials from these community groups across the province, both old and new, and presents this wide range of documents in a widely accessible way. And this is wonderful because it will be so valuable for many different types of users who will use these resources in many different ways. And that really is the value of the community knowledge open library. Okay, so let's dive into the website. So if you want to, on the next slide, I'm going to give a little walkthrough so you can explore with me, or if you want on your own, you're welcome to click the link, either link, and kind of follow me into the library and explore on your own. And just before I go ahead, I will mention that I did pre-record this. So the total of number of resources in the library has actually jumped since I recorded this over the weekend. We're up to 1,400 now, which is very exciting. So that said, I'm going to go to the next slide and we'll dive into the collection.
Okay, welcome everyone to the Community Knowledge Open Library. I'm so happy to have you here. Let's start with just a quick tour. So CKOL has 5 core facets on the left-hand side of the screen, which kind of act as a guide for the user. And these 5 facets are essentially umbrella terms in which all CKOL resources kind of fit under and slot into. So we have subject, geographical area, type, which refers to resource type, year, and contributing SQL partner. And this facet refers to the community group that is tied to each document. So most often that is through authorship. They're the ones that wrote the document, they're the ones that published it, but oftentimes it's not direct authorship. So for example, Joanne Pocock does a lot of research for CHSSN. So in that case, the community group CHSSN is not the author, but they're still tied to the document, just as an institution. That tie is still clear, just not as the author. And this field, this facet, can also be used when multiple partners collaborated on the same document, and they would all be listed like this. So this facet is an interesting one for sure, and it can be utilized by the user in many different ways. So I'm going to table this facet explanation here just for now, pick it back up in a minute. Right now I'll head back to the home screen, which I'll do just by clicking on this title right here. So that's the left-hand side. On the right-hand side of the library, we have all of the CKOL documents. So currently sitting at 1344, with about 1,000 more sitting in a cataloging queue. So lots to be done over the next year, lots more to come. And the full list here can be sorted in a number of ways using this sort by button. So you can search by author, title, and you can browse accordingly. So if you want to search for a specific term, and now I've just exposed myself for the rehearser and the practicer that I am, let's whimsically search for tourism. And these are all the resources that deal with tourism, right? We can scroll through page by page. If we prefer, we can go at a document level to the next, So there's lots of different ways to search here. And then again, you can either go back to the home page with this button or just returning to the list of results. And we can clear this if we want to search something else just by unchecking this box with a click or reset search. And again, I will expose myself as a practicer. Let's search for parents. And again, we get the same thing here. So let's click on a record and look at the page a little bit in detail. So this gives you some basic information about the document itself. Author, title, date, language, a citation in Turabian style, and of course the document itself, which we can either get to with this button or this large View Resources button at the top. All right, and just back to facets for a moment that I talked about earlier, we can see them in practice here. So this gives a user just kind of an idea of what the document is all about before they even dig in, and to judge whether or not it's something that they're going to be looking for. All right, and we'll return back to the main page. And we'll shift a little to classification, the real kind of organizational backbone of the library. So as I mentioned earlier, we have the 5 core facets seen here on the left. To get very technical, with CKOL, we've utilized a faceted classification system, which is a scheme which organizes knowledge or topics just in a systematic order. It uses semantic categories, which are then combined at the will of the user to create a full classification. To get far less technical, it's a hierarchy, which can be mixed and matched at the will of the user. And what's great about this hierarchy type interface is that it's very user-friendly. It doesn't overwhelm the user with every single term all at once, but it also doesn't start the user, with a blank screen and a search bar. It allows the user to kind of wade through the collection, its topics themselves and at their own pace if they want. And I'll get back to this in a minute. So what this faceted classification scheme means in practice is that if a user is looking for information on education or students during the COVID-19 pandemic, we don't have a facet for students during COVID, but rather there's a facet for education, which acts as an umbrella for many topics, but in this case, we'll say students. And then there's a facet for health, which acts as an umbrella for COVID-19. And this way, the user can kind of piece together, tailor their own recall and their own results. So when we pair these two subject facets together, you can get to what you want, which in this case is a survey done by Literacy Quebec last June. We can see the document here. Okay, so back to the home screen. That said, the site is also very intuitive. So if you don't want to do this kind of box by box facet search, if the user doesn't want to tailor their own recall, searching students during COVID will still recall the records and the resources that we're looking for. We can see the survey again here. So this kind of checkbox interface is a really interesting way to see how topics, regions, and community groups kind of work together. And it presents this really great web if that's what you're looking for. And you can see how all these different facets work together and play into each other. And if I can just jump back to this hierarchy at work kind of theme we have here, as you click through each level of the hierarchy, it will take you to a more specific term. So we can start with arts and culture and end up at authors, right? It doesn't present you with everything at once. For another example, we can look at government and law. So clicking on this facet immediately, it does two different things. On the right, it pulls up every document that's been classified under this subject. And then on the left-hand side, it narrows the facets down as well, right? So every geographic area, every type, every year that has a resource classified under government and law kind of gets narrowed down, right? We see this funnel, this hierarchy kind of happening here with our recall. And we can see 262 results. And if you want to get more specific, you want to look at a specific type of policy, you can by clicking policy. And the list narrows down even more. So this hierarchy gets a little bit more specific. And we went from 262 resources to 193. And from there, you can kind of even furrow, you can narrow down your type of policy content that you're looking for. We can see the document here. And again, the great thing about this is that it's very user friendly. So it doesn't have to be searched in this kind of checkbox hierarchy kind of way, but it can. So if you would like to come in and just search Bill 101, you get there the same way. It's just two different ways of getting to the same record. So these 5 facets that we see on the left, these pillars, are kind of what the CKOL documents are all measured against. And these facets were really inspired by the bibliography on English-speaking Quebec by Brendan O'Donnell, which I know David will allude to in a moment. But essentially, every document is measured up against these core 5, and I kind of ask myself, how does this content fit under here, right? Who wrote it? What is it about? Where in the province specifically does this document talk about, or does it apply to all of Quebec? Things like that, which sounds much easier than it is. But cataloging is something that it must be very technical and very rigid. It has to be done the same way every time, but yet it's incredibly subjective. And as a cataloger, you have to ask yourself this kind of golden question of, is this document about this topic, or does it just mention it? And is that mention worth noting? Would a user come to this library looking specifically for this mention, however niche? Well, then maybe I should mention it. And because, of course, the goal is to index each of these individual documents accordingly so that any user and as many users as possible can find these documents. That's the whole point. And that specificity and that generality, it's always a battle, but it's a fun one. And figuring out how to empirically judge across the board to get this library and this classification the way that you're seeing it here today has been really fun. And I'm so happy to be here today sharing this with all of you. So thank you so much for your time.
Hi, I'm David Lessier. I'm information systems developer at Québécois Bravo, which is the firm that was hired by QUESCREN to develop the CKOL website. Some of you might have noticed similarities between CKOL and the bibliography on English-speaking Quebec, and this is no coincidence. Because the technical requirements for CKOL were quite similar. As Rebecca has mentioned, we wanted a classification system that was inspired by the bibliography, and also the interface was to be simple, intuitive, quite minimalistic. Like the bibliography, we wanted to provide faceted navigation and search features. So there were lots of similarities. And the main difference was that the library was to contain actual documents. So it's not just metadata, but the similarities made it logical to use a similar architecture. Also, after the bibliography was developed in 2017, and after that, Québécois Bravo has worked on similar projects. So the software had already evolved before we started CKOL, and it could already handle documents. So, and there was also lots of other improvements. So it made a lot of sense to use the same technology. And the first part, maybe next slide, please. I'm not sure who controls the slideshow. Okay. The first part of our technological solution is Zotero. There are two parts, and the first one is Zotero, which is a reference management software, and we use it to manage the library a bit like we could manage a library catalog in other software. So we create metadata records in Zotero and attach documents to the records in Zotero. On what you see on the screenshot here is an example of the Zotero user interface. And on the left side, you have folders that represent our classification structure. And Zotero calls them collections and sub-collections. At the center, you see the metadata records. And on the right-hand side, there's a content of a selected record. So it's the text might be a bit small here. The idea is just to show you how it looks in general. It's not important to read what's on screen right now. So that's about the Zotero interface. Next slide, please. Yes. More about Zotero. Some of you may already know it. It's a widely used software by researchers. Researchers use it to organize large collections of scientific literature, and it's free and open source. It's developed by the Corporation for Digital Scholarship, which is a nonprofit organization that develops tools for researchers. And Zotero is easy to install on Mac, Windows, or even Linux. And how it works is that you can host your main database online on zotero.org, and multiple editors can access it through the software to work together in the same database. So the data is automatically synchronized between each editor's computer. So it makes collaboration and teamwork very easy. And the second part of the technological solution is Gecko. Gecko is a web application that's installed on a web server, and it is Gecko that provides the faceted navigation and search interface. So Gecko interfaces with Zotero databases to provide such features, and it can be customized according to different project needs. So when you visit CKOL, the interface you see is provided by Gecko. And Gecko was developed by Québécois Bravo after having worked on similar projects. So I can show you. So here's a list of example projects that were quite similar. So the first one was Bibliographie des études sur l'histoire de Montréal. That one was led by a research team at UQAM in 2014. And after that, we have worked on the Bibliographie en English-speaking Quebec by Brendan O'Donnell. So that project was led by QUESCREN. And after having worked on those two projects, that's when the idea of developing CKOL appeared, because, we discovered that many research groups wanted to use similar software. So following that, there was another project, which is the Bibliographie francophone sur l'archivistique, which is led by an international nonprofit that's called AIIF, Association Internationale des Archives Francophones. We did a lot of development that led to CKOL through that project. And then we have worked on the Hub evidence library, which also helped improve CKOL. So all of those projects had similarities, but also differences. We made CKOL customizable, so it could be adapted to those. So here's a screenshot of the Bibliographie francophone sur l'archivistique. There's another one. So this one is EdTech Hub. They have an evidence library with and this one is from it's the Education Policy Toolbox Library from UNESCO International Institute for Educational Planning. So all of those interfaces, they share the same DNA, but the graphic design can be adapted to the context. So Gecko allows that. So a little bit more on that solution is, I could say that Zotero, since Zotero is mainly designed to manage metadata, it might look like an unusual choice for a document repository, and I guess it is, but by using Zotero and CKOL together, we could minimize cost a lot. Compared to developing a similar user interface on top of a digital repository software, because we found out that existing software did not always have such user-friendly interface. So that's one of the reasons we wanted to use CKOL. And also CKOL was already available before the project started. So it helped a lot. And QUESCREN knew the tools, like all the team behind this project, behind CKOL. They already had the experience with the bibliography on English-speaking Quebec. So it was another way to get the solution up and running much faster. Zotero has lots of benefits. It's solid, it's well established, easy to use. It's open source, it's extensible, you can install plugins, there's a large user community, and you can interact with users on the forums, and they can provide very valuable support. And also, because we rely on having the database online on Zotero.org, we don't need to worry about hosting the master database, so that's less technical hurdles to care about, but we only have to host CKOL. Of course, Zotero is not perfect for that kind of project. I'd say Zotero has a metadata schema that's non-standard and not easily modified or extended. And also gray literature does not always fit well with that schema because it's designed for published works mainly. So we had to find workarounds. Also, I could say that Zotero has no versioning or history of changes. to the records of files. So we have to be very careful about the changes we do. However, in the end, the solution works very well, and there's no perfect solution in software. So this one has worked well for CKOL so far. So we hope you like the result too.
Hi, everyone. I'll be speaking a little bit about the resource as it relates to English-speaking Quebec and our future plans. Grey literature is extremely valuable for English-speaking Quebec. For one thing, it's easier to produce than formal publications. Virtually all community organizations that I know of anyway create grey literature in their day-to-day functioning, and they do so regularly. So as such, it tends to be more timely and very engaged in priority issues. The turnaround time for creating it is much shorter than publications, formal ones. So what's captured in CKOL may show communities, organizations up to the minute responses to issues. It also, because it's easy to produce, tends to capture a wider range of voices that may not be found in formal publications, and those include of minorities and women. Next slide. Why is that? Groups historically marginalized have been able to produce grey literature much more easily than formal publications. And there's some interesting scholarship on this question. So if you look at our CKOL database, you'll find a lot of information about groups that, as I mentioned, didn't traditionally have access or as much access to formal publications. They include women, and here's an example of a publication by Youth Employment Services about women in tech. Also, next slide, Black communities. So here's just one of many publications in CKOL on Black communities speaking out about violence from BCRC. Thank you. I wanted to mention, just adding to something Rebecca talked about, this is a bit of an aside. All of the documents in CKOL are fully searchable. So it's not only the so-called metadata, the description of the documentation that can be found through the search bar, anything in the documents. So the actual content of the resources themselves are also searchable. So you can put proper names, names of groups, places, and so on. If they're in the documents, you'll find them. That's an aside. Future plans for CKOL. So far, much of what is on CKOL is fairly recent. The oldest dated resource I saw when I prepared for this slide was from 1964 from the QFHSA, well, formerly known as QFPHSA, I guess. But given the great value of grey literature to English-speaking Quebec, our future plans for CKOL include working with groups to put up some of their older material as much as we can. This may require us to scan material or hiring people within the groups to do the scanning. And this will, of course, greatly round out our knowledge base on English-speaking Quebec. And for your information, we hope to work with the John Abbott College's Information and Library Technology program, its faculty and students, to develop internships and jobs for students to work with us to develop CKOL and to put more information in the database, for example, by cataloging and scanning. So this will not only help us do our work, it will also help us build links with one of Quebec's English language institutions, in this case, John Abbott College. It will also help the students learn more about our communities, so it's win-win-win. In terms of looking at older materials, we have questions and we'd love to hear from people during the Q&A session. Who knows, for example, where Alliance Quebec grey literature is? Alliance Quebec having been one of the very important community groups for English-speaking Quebec that has been defunct for many years now. Next. Another future plan for CKOL includes working with QCGN, Quebec Community Groups Network, on their data roundtable and more generally on their community development plan. If you want to learn more about this initiative, go to CKOL. We've got a document pictured here that describes the community development plan of QCGN. So the details have yet to be determined, but clearly having both old and new material on CKOL will support QCGN's goal, which is to build knowledge on English-speaking Quebec, both for communities ourselves and also for others, including policymakers who are making future plans for our communities. Next. We can see that CKOL can continue to grow a lot. We want to have more partners, and the partners we already have, we want to have more of their documents, including their older ones. So one of our priorities is going to be to find sustainable funding for CKOL. We'll certainly be in future discussions with the Secretariat to see about the possibilities for funding there into the future. But we also want to potentially apply for federal government funding. So please let us know if you have leads for where we could apply for funding. We also have plans maybe to work with government partners to put government documents in CKOL. That has to be developed too, and that could be part of our funding initiative as part of our future plans. Next. As I mentioned, we want to engage more community organization partners. Would your organization like to be a partner group? Or do you have a lead to other partner groups that might want to be involved? And that could be to respond to some of the questions that had been in the chat. That could be partner groups that exist now or previously existing groups where you know where documents are or people who were involved. If you have leads, we want to know. So my colleagues will be putting in the chat that link that you see there to the JOT form where you can fill out a little form asking you for the name of the group and for the contact information, either yours or those who you think could help us do that. So I'll ask Lena to put that link in the chat. Thank you.
Thank you, David, Rebecca, and Lorraine. We're now going to have a few testimonials from some of the partners involved in this project, and we'll start with the Coasters Association. Coasters Association is based on the lower north shore of Quebec, which is the region that borders Labrador. And they've been an enthusiastic supporter of the project and one of the first organizations to join CKOL. We're happy to have with us today Priscilla Griffin, Office Manager, and Shannon Keats, Executive Assistant at the Coasters Association, to tell us more about their experience with CKOL.
Hi, good afternoon. As Patrick said, I'm Priscilla Griffin, the Office Manager at Coasters. I've been with the Coasters Association for 29 years now. We're a 33-year-old organization, and Mr. Flock actually was one of the founding members of this organization. We live in a region of 14 communities. We're all dispersed, not connected by road. This year we have a white highway, a snowmobile highway, which we didn't have for a few years. So that was a plus for this season. This project is amazing. When Lorraine called first to see if we want to participate in this, it would open the door, because a lot of times in our region we feel lost, because if you go online you don't see a lot of information about our region, and we feel left out a lot, especially being an English organization. But I think this library is going to open up that door for us. And until we start researching, it was amazing. We didn't realize how much stuff we had in 33 years, going from floppy disks to now trying to digitalize everything and trying to capture everything, because it's an amazing journey. And I can see where this library, not only for our organization, but all the organizations in our region, that could put in there, and we can start gathering information about the Lower North Shore. So anybody that wanted to research us, even our own people don't know half of what's going on in our region because of lack of communication. You know, we don't have a radio station that connects us all. So really we don't have anything that connects us. So but right now I'm gonna, because I can chat on forever, I'll have to stop myself and pass you to Shannon.
Hi, everyone. As mentioned before, my name is Shannon Keats. I'm the executive assistant, and I've actually been working for the Coasters for a little over 23 years now. Oh my God, 23 years. When the decision was made to participate in this project, we were all actually pretty excited. It's the Coasters policy to, when there's a project or anything that's happening, it's Coasters policy to actually create a report at the end of whether the project is 3 months, 6 weeks, or 6 months, or a year. It's our policy to create a document kind of that encapsulates all of what happened during that project. And so we've developed quite a few, and when we were given the opportunity to research, we had no idea just how many we had. Like Priscilla had mentioned, some were even on a floppy disk. Many documents weren't digitized, so it was a learning curve for us too. The thing is, we weren't able to digitize all of them, but it's our plan now, and this is kind of, this CKOL project has been an impetus for us to actually go ahead and do that. And I want to take this opportunity to thank Lorraine and Rebecca and QUESCREN for the opportunity to, you know, preserve this information. Like I said, it's really big motivation for us now to kind of move forward and digitize the rest of the documentation that we do have, and upload it to our own operating platform. So I'm very excited to be a part of this. We're both very excited to be a part of this, and we can't wait to see what's going to be happening in the future. Yeah.
Thank you, Priscilla and Shannon. And just to add on to that, I'd just like to say that we don't expect organizations, you know, all these community organizations, a lot of them work on, you know, small budgets and don't necessarily have the time and the resources to digitize all of this. So our goal is to get sustainable funding to work with these organizations, to fund people, either to have people from QUESCREN go to these organizations and digitize, or to fund people within the organizations to do the digitization. That's what we did with a pilot project with Coasters.
Definitely, and we appreciate that. And you know, as a child, I wanted to be a librarian, but I never thought it would be a digital librarian.
So now we're going to move on to Stephen Thompson, Director of Government Relations, Policy and Research at the Quebec Community Groups Network, who will also speak on the importance of this project for English-speaking communities in Quebec.
So I'll just echo this sort of enthusiasm that we had initially when we heard about this project from Priscilla and Shannon. And it's a great idea. I think it's a way that we can all share information together. It's a database. It's good for current operations. It's good for, it's a great legacy tool for folks that are going to come after us and are looking back, academics. It's just great. Some of the challenges, I'll just tell you some of the challenges we had. This was put together during the pandemic, of course. So there was a lot of confusion about what this was about. Who handles this in our office? What is great literature? I really appreciated Rebecca's explanation today, which would have been super helpful for me trying to explain it to everybody else at the beginning of this process. Because an organization like ours that produces a lot of information, a lot of documents, what is it that you make public? What is it that you release? Those types of decisions, at what level you sort of need an internal process to make those decisions. And I suppose the next question is that once you have an internal process on what it is you're going to share, who keeps it up? Who's going to maintain this database? Who is going to, on a daily basis when you're producing documents, who's going to remember, or how is that going to get triggered that this gets sort of somehow picked up or tagged or sent to the sent to CKOL? Priscilla and Shannon and a lot of folks on this call, and myself included, will remember back in the day before computers, even when computers came out, filing systems. When it was relatively simple, you had a filing, you put a file number on everything, everything was filed, you'd be able to go to one place and find it. It's just not the way information flows anymore. There's emails, there's all kinds of things flying around, nothing's really cataloged anymore. And so for a larger organization, keeping track of all of that and trying to deciding what goes into CKOL, capturing it and what goes into it is a challenge. And we were very lucky. I have a lot of respect for the job that of librarians and Rebecca's profession. We were very lucky one year at the QCGN. We had an intern with us, a librarian who was pursuing her master's in library science. And what a difference that made, because we turned her loose on our information flow in the organization. And that was over 10 years ago. And the positive effects of that experience we're still living those. So if you ever have access, or if you ever have the opportunity to get a librarian as an intern into your organization, grab it. It just works wonders. On some of the other points that got brought up, I'm just sort of intrigued, and this is just there's no answer to this question. I'm just intrigued by all of the work that Jan Warnicke and other, Wendy Says is on the call today, and other geographers have done. And Bill too has done a lot of work on this. And is there a way to sort of merge CKOL onto those geography projects? I don't know. And the other thing, yeah, I guess that's probably enough. The other question about where's the data on Alliance Quebec, I don't know the answer to that question, but I do know that if somebody can get into Martin Murphy's basement, you've got probably another 100,000 documents for CKOL. He's just, and I think everybody in sort of has a Martin Murphy or a Martin Murphy type person in mind, sort of old school, no computers, everything on paper, and kept the papers and kept it organized. So the stuff definitely exists out there, and so we might want to act on this sooner rather than later, because a lot of these folks are getting on, and a lot of that stuff's going to get lost. And great initiative. Thanks, Lorraine. Thanks, Bill, for the funding for this. It's fantastic.
Thank you, Stephen. So now we're going to move to the question period, and I guess we can start with Stephen's question about the material that Jan Warnicke has produced over the year. Jan Warnicke runs a business in Quebec City called JW.com. He does a lot of work with statistics and maps, and I can say that we are working with Jan right now to produce a database called DESQ, D-E-S-Q, the data portal on English-speaking Quebec. David will be working with us on that, and that will include a lot of the statistical databases from the 1996, 2001 to the censuses every 5 years that have been collected over the years, but that aren't necessarily available and that relate to official language minority communities. Lorraine, do you have anything to add on that?
No, just that I'm proud of these acronyms we're coming up with. Yeah, you didn't mention, but CKOL is like, listen, seek all, get it?
Yes, that was a moment of genius there from Lorraine, and we're very grateful. So another question from Carol Meindl: how is the database updated? Are additional resources requested from partner organizations, or are they collected from websites? Well, for phase one, what we did is we mostly collected from websites. We got in touch with all the organizations and asked them to email us their stuff that was easily accessible, on their laptops and so on, or sometimes on a internal drives that were not accessible on the web, but that are accessible to us. And at this point, what I'm doing is trawling the web every 4 months or so for all of our partner organizations, and pulling out all the new publications that I can see on their websites. In the long term, we hope to get interns to do that work regularly. And as Lorraine mentioned, we're working with John Abbott College. Lorraine, do you have anything to add regarding that question?
Just to say, we're well aware, we conceive of CKOL up to now as a pilot phase. And David and Rebecca, I just want to underline how fantastic they are to work with, how flexible and open they are to Patrick and my constantly changing and developing parameters for the project. But we do see it up to now as a pilot. It's officially launched. So today you're all present at the launch, but we can see how big it could grow because we could have more partners and we could go further back in time. And obviously this is potentially exponential growth. So Patrick and I will be thinking very seriously about how to structure a growth phase, phase 2, to incorporate these new parameters and to see what kind of funding is possible. But we are very open to suggestions. Perhaps down the road, we could have an advisory committee, or certainly for the time being, we're very open to community partner for any community members' suggestions for how to grow this project reasonably and fairly, and always with an eye to inclusiveness.
Question from Lauren Houston. Is there any plan to develop a bibliography of online archive sources which are relevant to the history of Anglophone Quebec? I'm thinking about documents that have been scanned by organizations like the McCord, Museum of Fine Arts, historical societies, school boards, etc. Lorraine?
I'm glad you brought up archives, Lauren, and I'm glad you're here today. Lauren is a researcher, an important researcher on cultural institutions and cultural activities historically in English-speaking Quebec. So publications we've got covered now through the bibliography Brendan prepares that we produce online. Our CKOL is the gray literature that Rebecca explained. Archival material is different. It's one-off material. It's not public-facing material. So to give you an example, an annual report would go in CKOL. It's gray lit. Your internal memos that are shared among your colleagues is not gray literature. Okay, so anything archival, it might look like gray literature, but if it's unique, there's more to it than that. But roughly speaking, if it's unique, it's not gray literature. We do not have plans, but to tell you the truth, what I do see as a useful project down the road is to at least start listing relevant material, Lauren. You know, to have some kind of catalog of relevant archival materials related to English-speaking Quebec community groups and significant individuals, people, places, and events. But that's down the road. So right now, no, we don't have projects, but shoot me an email and we can start talking.
And as Fabian Willis pointed out, who works at the Eastern Townships Resource Center, there are a lot of regional archival databases, some of which have material available online. And he gives a link there in the chat, townshipsarchives.ca, for instance, for the townships. A question from Hala Al-Ubaidi. How can I get help to start scanning my old documents? Who is at the NDG Community Council? I see you've got documents dating back to 1945. That's quite impressive. I would say the first step there is to fill out our form. And you can see the link further up, the form to join, to start contributing material to our online library. Then we can sign an agreement with you that you agree to have your stuff you know, a licensing agreement so that you agree to have our stuff online. And, you know, every year we'll have a budget or so devoted to digitizing. We can go and help you do that, hopefully get some interns from the library tech programs, go digitize your material. So we're hoping to do more and more in-person digitizing of old material, paper documents as time goes on. I don't see any other questions. And it's 12:57, so we're at the end of this presentation. So I'm going to move on to some concluding remarks. Lorraine, unless you have anything else to add?
Just to reiterate your point, Patrick, that if anyone has leads on old material that they don't have but other people might, either fill out the form or send Patrick or I an email and we'll follow up. Thank you.
So thank you all for attending today's event. In closing, I would like to acknowledge again that this event was made possible through the financial support of the Secretariat aux relations avec les Québécois d'expression anglaise, who also funded CKOL. QUESCREN also receives funding from the Department of Canadian Heritage, the Canadian Institute for Research on Linguistic Minorities, and Concordia University. Thank you to our tech manager for today's events at Anglo, and thank you again for being here, and we wish you all a great day. See you next time.